Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and it's time for our monthly Scrawlrbox unboxing. I have to say I'm quite surprised to see this. I was expecting it to be much later, probably into November before I got it. So happy days! And as per usual, Scrawlrbox is the UK's only monthly art subscription box. There are a few goodies that come in the box every month, which we will go through as we go along. Everything's all beautifully wrapped this time, which I love. So, oh, this is interesting. So let's take a look at what's going on in here first. Okie dokie, so we've got our Scrawler zine, which is a mini magazine that comes every month now. It's concise, it's entertaining, and it's also helpful as well. We'll take a look at that in just a second because we don't want to ruin the surprise. We also have a featured artist every month, and oh, this is beautiful. And it looks remarkably like we've got some markers, which I keep saying now we haven't had markers for a long time, and it's probably my least favourite medium, so we were due a set at some point. But these look like calligraphy pens just by the shape of the strokes, but this is really pretty. Okay, Eamon Hazuri, aka Calligraphy Paint. Eamon Hazuri is a Syrian artist living and working in France, so there's a little bit about him there, as well as links to his social media, so that if you like what you see, you can go and check out some more of his work. Okay, we usually get a surface to art on, and this is a scrawler pad of 140 GSM cartridge paper, and this looks like we'll be making bookmarks with it. It feels nice, it's got a little bit of texture, that would do well for coloured pencil, which is more my bag. And the fact that we've got 20 sheets of it, you could make some bookmarks for Christmas presents maybe, or any other festive holiday that you celebrate, non-denominational. So let's take a look inside the package. We do have a few bits and bobs in here that we get regularly, so we have got our list of supplies, which again will not spoil things with. We have our Scrawlrbox sticker, which matches our zine, like so, very matchy. And here we go, we have our sweet as well, and this time it is an Uncle Joe's mint ball. Keep you all aglow. Okay, it's gluten free, it's vegan as well, so if you fancy a wee bash at that, you can batter in, as we would say. Okay, so here's the inevitable, let's just get this over. A pack of markers, manuscript, Flexi Creative. Wow, that's a mouthful. Okay, so they've got bendy nibs apparently, which lends itself quite well to nice brush strokes. There seems to be quite a nice selection of colours. There's 12 pens in here. Flexible italic markers, ventilated cap, washable ink, so it's water-based ink. These are quite chunky. Get out of the box. Okay, so the good news is we've got black and brown, which is always nice. And we have a lovely selection of colours here. I am instantly drawn naturally to the green stroke blue category. So this is right up my street here. So let's take a look at the nibs on these. Okay, they are quite an interesting chisel nib. They do have like an indent cut out of them. Hopefully you can see that in this light. So they are like sort of pinched into a point, which is quite interesting. So we'll get those swatched out in just a little min. We've also got a Conur Hardmouth B pencil. We're really building up our collection of these. We were given a 2B before as well. These pencils are okay. I use a B grade pencil a lot of time for sketching, and I prefer it to an HB because it's just that little bit softer. So happy to have one of those. We have got a, okay, this is all in other language. It's all characters, and it has a very fine black felt nib on one end. I don't know whether this end is grey or whether it's black and they've just changed it, but that looks more like a... wait a minute. Those two nibs look the same. Right, okay, we're going to have to find out a bit more about that because I can't decipher anything from the actual writing on the barrel, which is fine. And we have a Centra Pen liner. Let's see what doesn't tell you anything about... a 2811F, so I'm assuming the F will stand for fine. Fine liner. Okay, cool beans. So let's take one of our little sheets of paper here and let's test out some of these markers. So I'm really curious about this. Oh, they really are flexible. So because we've got this funny chisel shape, we can do some really interesting things with the nibs. But when we're working, if you press down at any point, it's going to change the shape of the line. So that's just me pressing and releasing, and you can see that it's given me quite an interesting pattern. And I imagine that if you are a calligrapher, then these could be very interesting to work with indeed. The ink seems fairly juicy and it's not taking too long to dry. The black is very grey though, and on the camera it really doesn't look it, but it's drying, not a deep black, I would say. Right, let's test out some of these other colours then. We've got brown, or if you're Scottish, brune. Okay, so that's good. At least next to the grey, the black looks quite black. That's always something. I'm zoomed in a wee bit too much there. Okay, so the colours are fairly vibrant. The red's always a good test of vibrancy, I think. Or, you know, sometimes oh, that's a nice colour. It's a very magenta-y. Now, these pens don't have any colour names on them. I don't suppose that's going to be much of an issue because they are all very different. It's not as if the caps are... you know, there's two that are maybe similar. The other thing as well is the ink colour seems to be quite close to the cap colour as well, which is good. Oh wow, that's like a fluorescent green. It almost looks like a highlighter. Okay, not so keen on that one. Please be nice, please be nice. Okay, here's a nice turquoisey colour. I'm into that. Now you can see there where I've been going over the top, that's not exactly dried, and I do have ink all down the side of my hand. So we need to watch the drying time of that. I wonder if this clearly isn't dry. I can see this isn't dry. Oh, that's smudging quite a lot. Let's try this bit up here. Okay, these pens smudge like hell. Now that's interesting. I'm going to leave the rest of them. We may have to give them more drying time. So these do not dry quickly. That's just something to note. Particularly if you are going to do calligraphy and you're left-handed, that might be a problem. Not that I'll be doing any calligraphy. The colours are nice though, I'm enjoying the colours. I've got lots of choice with the colours. Oh, I've got a dodgy nib as well. What's going on there? Oh, it's gone. I had a bit of contamination there. Ah, you can see it there. Okay. Okay. And then we've got like a lighter blue. Oh, that's nice as well. Alright, colours are fairly good. So we've got our B pencil. So slightly softer than an HB, but not much. Again, a pencil I would like to use in my sketchbook. If I'm just doing quick sketches, I can use this and it erases pretty well. I can still get some fairly fine and delicate lines that are reasonably accurate, but I can pop in a wee bit of shade in there that I wouldn't get with as much depth if I was using an HB. So yep, happy with that. Okay, so this nib, it's like a brush nib. I would say not a particularly flexible brush nib, but a brush nib nonetheless. And I always think that these firmer brush nibs are better if you're newer to using a brush nib because they're easier to control than the ones that are really bendy, you know, just until you get the hang of things. This one is a lot softer and it is indeed. I'm assuming that's supposed to be grey. Wow, that's leaving an interesting pattern as well. So let's check out our fine liner. Oh, I'm not really a fan of these types of fine liners. It feels like a fibre nib because it's quite scratchy. The laydown seems to be quite consistent. It's not particularly black. You know, it's not particularly deep. It feels a little bit scratchy. I can't say I'm a fan of this. I think this would fare well on smoother paper. As I said, this paper's got a bit of texture on it, so kind of middling about that. But okay. Righty-ho, let's take a look at our supplies. Once I've gone through the zine, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a smudge test with these because that should be plenty of time to dry. And I'll need to wash my hands before I do it. Okay, so Scrawler zine. Whoop. Let's see what it says here. So we've got a black brush, bold black brush lines. Goodness me, say that with a drink in you. And a grey brush, great for shading or shadow, so it is supposed to be grey. Pencils, flexible italic nibs. Okay, doesn't tell us anything that we haven't already found out ourselves, which is fine. So this is the interview section with the artist, and a lot of questions about what inspires their artwork and what's your favourite medium. But these are lovely. Look at these designs. That's stunning. That is really, really nice. You have to have a lot of patience for stuff like that. Scrawler tips, there we go. So there's giving you some things if you want to do some lettering, then it's giving you an idea of this type of strokes and what you should be doing. I will definitely read this, and I know I say that every month and I always forget, but I will read this before I start an artwork. And here is some of last month's Scrawler galleries. Well, it's the month before. I love this. This is my favourite page in this entire book. And I'm really, really, really glad to see that there is an animal in there, because I knew there was going to be a lot of faces. So this is amazing. This makes me really happy. I could sit and look at these for ages. The art of words. So they're talking about handwriting and things. And the little Scrawler update. So it's like a little dinky news page as well. So that is our Scrawler zine. Right, let's take a look at this list of supplies and see if we can learn anything new. Okay, so our manuscript, Cali Creative Flexi markers, good grief. And it says here, ideal for hand lettering, calligraphy, versatile flexible tip, perfect for creating a unique and fluid look to your calligraphy, graffiti, style, lettering and artwork. Traditional calligraphy with accessibility and usability of a modern marker. Non-toxic water-based ink that brings vibrant and opaque colour to your artistic creations. Opaque? Really? Okay. Okay, so this is a Kuretake marker, the one where I couldn't read anything on it. That makes sense now. So the twin tip marker tells you a little bit about Kuretake. Highly pigmented black and grey ink with flexible brush nibs. It has been designed for Japanese calligraphy characters specifically. The flexible tip allows for incredibly thin writing and drawing when used with a delicate touch, or bold darker lines when used with greater pressure or at a steeper angle. These markers are designed to make creating the delicate sweeps and curves of calligraphy easier to master. That's what I was saying about the amount of flexibility in the brush tip. The Centra pen liner, attractive white barrel, nope. A round cap design, lightweight, easy to use, delicate soft touch nib, okay. The Koh-i-Noor pencil, it's a pencil. And the cartridge paper, a thick and heavy backing to your artistic masterpieces. Its unusual shape will provide a different perspective to your creations. So again, thinking about Japanese calligraphy, they tend to go top to bottom as far as I'm aware. So that makes sense again why we have a pad that's this shape, because if you were doing that kind of thing, that would, lend itself. Obviously, if you are doing some Western writing, you can just turn it around, but that makes sense now, that makes sense. Okay, and the Scrawler challenge is asemic aesthetic. Good grief. Asemic aesthetic. I think this means nonsense, like just made up. I'm going to have to look it up. Asemic writing is a wordless open semantic form of writing, having no specific semantic content or without the smallest unit of meaning. Okay, yes, so it's nonsense. So maybe letters that don't actually look like letters, or no, they do look like letters, but they aren't actually letters, or maybe just a nonsense paragraph, something like that. It does say underneath, using lines and symbols that look like writing but do not have any meaning, relating to the enjoyment or study of beauty. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Don't really know what to make of that, but we shall see. I think I can safely assume that I'll be steering more towards the art variety rather than the calligraphic variety, but I'm just going to get all this cleared out the way and grab my sketchbook and see if we can come up with some sort of idea. Alrighty, so I've had a little think about this and I've had a little bit of a tidy up. Obviously this isn't really something that floats my boat. I'm not a huge fan of pens of any description and I don't really enjoy working in ink. I'm just kind of going with my first thought, which is almost like a Celtic cross design. Now, being Scottish, being taught how to do Celtic patterns in some sort of form is something that's done, when you're little. I can't really remember it all. And it's very intricate and very complicated. So this might not be within the scope of this particular video, but I thought we could go along those lines, something of that ilk. There's a few things I want to test out though, just before I sort of embark on anything ridiculous. The first thing is just going back to these little swatches here, and if I rub my finger over them, they do smudge. The coloured one's not so much. The black one is particularly bad though, and that has been dry a very, very long time. So it's just something to be aware of if you're working with them. You need to try and use a light hand and keep your fingers out of the black for a good length of time to really give it a chance to soak in. The other thing that I was kind of sceptical about that I read was that these markers are opaque. Now, when I think of opacity, I think of Posca pens. Obviously, they're a completely different medium, they're paint-based, but when something is opaque, you can't see through it, and I'm not convinced that these markers are what they say they are. So I just want to try out with a couple of darker colours. So here's a blue, and if we just make a nice line with that, we'll give it time to dry. And also let's do the same with the red here. And we'll let that dry as well. Just give it a minute or two. On my sketchbook, the ink is starting to bleed slightly, just very, very slightly. And that's something that wasn't as apparent on the actual paper that we've been given. So again, if you're thinking about using these on other papers, I would say one more suited to the use of ink would be better. Obviously my sketchbook is kind of geared toward pencils, so this is no surprise, but it's not that noticeable. You know, unless you're actually looking for it, it's not that bad. So yeah, let's go back up here. So a Celtic cross design, there's usually kind of a few standard sort of shapes of cross, and obviously we've got this basic cross. They just sort of made them more ornate, and a lot of them have a ring behind them as well. Now I'm sure this has got a proper name, and if anybody wants to enlighten me, please feel free. I don't like to be ignorant of these things. I'm sure this particular type of cross has a name, so I'm just trying to sort of rough this out here. But what I was thinking was, if we look at the featured artist's artwork and take into account the more sort of calligraphy style that these pens are geared towards, I was thinking we could maybe do some sort of intricate pattern, not necessarily a Celtic knotwork, but you know, something with maybe the same kind of feel or along the same vein. But I would quite like to have quite an interesting cross. So what I was thinking was we could have like a jewel or a gemstone in the middle, because these colours like this, we could make a really nice job with that and leave like a really nice highlight on it, and maybe have some sort of, you know, fascia or frame around it. And then we could maybe split this off into sections again, which is quite common in Celtic designs. So, you know, you could have something like this. And that would give us 4 separate sections to work in, you know, to put our pattern in, if you like. See how my ink's doing down here. The blue one's pretty dry. Okay. Yellow's a great example of this. So if these are opaque, we should not be able to see any blue through the yellow. Surprise, surprise, the cross section in the middle, it's gone a slightly greenish shade. And I'm just wondering if that's tainted the marker at all. It doesn't seem to be too bad actually. You might have to wipe these off. And again, if I do the same with the red, okay. I would quite like to make the cross itself a bit more interesting. The other thing that I'm kind of aware of is, because of the size of the paper that we have, the size of these nibs, when you draw them out in a broad stroke, I'll just show you on the back of this one that we've used already. When you draw out a broad stroke, that is a significant proportion of the actual sheet of paper itself. So if you were wanting to do something really intricate, you would be wanting to use that sort of chiseled edge, you know, with these thinner lines. But every time you go in a curve, you're going to get this fat line, unless you start maneuvering the pen with you as you go, like this. So that could add an interesting dynamic, but it'd also be a complete disaster as well. Let's think about this cross then. What if we got a nail polish bottle here? This was what was on my nails. There's not much of it left. And this is Rimmel Mermaid Fin, and it's lovely. It's really nice. Anyway, so we'll just draw around this. That might be considered cheating by some, but I'm totally okay with it. So even if we just use that as our inner ring, just to give us a bit of an idea here and a wee bit of space to work with while we're figuring things out. An old friend of mine who I haven't seen for a long time, he has got a massive one of these tattooed down his calf, and it is quite a sight to behold. It's an amazing tattoo. And that's what's kind of like popping into my mind right now. Yeah, we could bring these out, make them a bit more rounded. Again, I'm concerned already though, because if I hold that up against here, it's actually wider than what we've got to work with, and for using these pens that is just not going to be great. I don't think I'm going to get the aesthetic that I want, but I'm going to try. Yeah, I think I'm just going to have to try and map this out as best I can. I wish these were slightly wider. Now I've got to think about my circle. I'm actually quite happy with that, but as I say, with these markers I'm not really sure. With it being a B pencil that we've been given, this is ideal for this because it's quite soft So as long as you're light-handed, you can take off a lot of the graphite and it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to mark the paper, so to speak. So I think what I'll do is I'll just make a start here and then just do the same all the way around. So really utilise that broad stroke on these end parts. Okay, so I want to think about some darker areas. Get this colour down. Ooh. Incidentally, my kitchen has been pulled to pieces and we're getting a new kitchen put in. And this is very similar to the colour that some of our kitchen walls are going to be. The kitchen itself, as in the units and the floor and everything, is very insipid. It's very plain and boring. So we decided we would go for a pop of colour. And Mr. Gem's quite fun when it comes to stuff like that. So if we decide we don't like it though, or it's a bit too brave, we can always paint over it. So again, I think I want to use this orange just down here. Get that a bit darker in there. If I take the blue here, bearing in mind that we now know that this is transparent, we can actually let this sort of bleed into it and just give it a bit of depth. You know, don't have the sort of just these flat colours. Now I'm just interested to see what happens if I go back over here. See these orange areas? I'm going back over with the yellow and I'm actually able to smooth that out and blend it out. When you're doing stuff like this is, you know, absolutely fine, but you just need to remember to clean off the tip of your marker once you're finished so that it doesn't permanently taint it. But yeah, I'm pleased that we can do that. That's quite an interesting effect actually. It's making for really messy line work, but I'm actually okay with that. I might, there we go, I'll just clean my brush off here. I always think that, see, when I'm sitting here doing this, obviously I can't see it from your perspective, I'm just doing my thing here, but I always think it's blatantly obvious that I am not in my, you know, my modus operandi, so to speak. I'm very uncomfortable with this and I find it difficult to get anything to look the way I want it to look because it's just not floating my boat. I'm using my graphite pencil here just to give us a background. I don't know how well this is going to work and how much the graphite's going to muddy things, you know, the aforementioned conversation, but I'd just like to try. So I think here I'll stick with the purple to begin with, and I'm just going to put in some like tiny made up symbols and dots and things like that. I'm just using the very tip of the chisel nib here, and the very pointy point down in the bottom side there. And that's given me a nice fine mark to work with. And that's the joy of these types of pens, you know, they are quite versatile, and obviously that's why they lend themselves to calligraphy. I was taught calligraphy in school as well, and it's one of those things where I'm quite a patient person, but I didn't have enough interest. Like, it didn't hold my interest for me to want to be patient with it. It seemed like a lot of work, especially if you've got handwriting like mine, which is quite sort of swirly and not that easy to read. You know, I'm just like, yes, just might as well write in a normal handwriting. Oh, and that is bleeding like crazy. That is really disappointing. Really disappointing. That is feathered something chronic. I'm just going to zoom in to show you. Although that's as far as I can zoom in, but I hope you can see that here. The line has bled. This is something that really annoys me because when these subscription boxes are put together, that is something that should be rigorously tested. We're talking about a fine liner here, you know, we're not talking about a specialist piece of kit, but the fine liner should always be compatible with the other items that you're working with, and it's just bleeding like crazy. So that's really disappointing, and it's actually made me quite annoyed because I'm really trying to be careful here and make something of this, and it's kind of ruining it, to be honest. I don't have time to sit about and wait 4 hours for things to dry. They may well be okay. I've noticed it's bled a bit here around this part as well. So it might be a case of putting the fine liner down first and letting it dry and then going in with the marker. But if this is a water-based fine liner, when you use these pens, because they're quite juicy, the same thing's going to happen and you're just going to pull the black ink into your colour. So that's kind of one of those things where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So what we're doing here is we're creating a bit of contrast because we've used yellow. That's going to really help that to pop out. But also that's us sectioning off each arm of the cross as well so that we can work on a pattern. Because we've got this great big thick band at the top here, we don't want to cut into that too much. But we also don't want to cut into the white area because that's where our the main sort of pattern is going to go. I think as well one of the other reasons is that I don't like ink is I don't have a particularly steady hand. And pencil and paint is a little bit more forgiving, whereas even a slight hand tremor shows when you're working in ink. And it does disappear with practice, because I can say for certain that my line work in general is a lot better than it used to be, but I have my limitations with that, so there's only so much I can do. But I think it's maybe why I tend not to favour this sort of idea. I'm trying to give this as long as possible to dry. Now I want these two to be symmetrical. And I'm going to go a mix of pink and purple on the top. So I think what we'll do is we'll do maybe a design here that might look like figures or letters or numbers. Oh, that one's a little bit heavy-handed. But that's reasonably similar. I'm really enjoying the pink. Weirdly, I'm not a pink person, but there seems to be that sort of shade of magenta that just tickles me for some reason. It's really difficult to think of letters that are not letters. Oh, jeez. See, I feel like having this bigger area to work in here is going to give us a bit more of what we want in terms of actually working with the purpose of the way nature intended with these pens, as it were. I think if I had a bigger sheet of paper, then I would have got on better with this, because this is really not... when you're learning something or you're working with something new, it's better to work big, because it gives you a chance to really pin down those finer details without, having to squeeze them into a tiny space. So that's kind of the way I'm feeling about this. I do like the fact that we've got a different type of paper here. That I'm really enjoying that. Okay, that's fairly interesting. Right, let's see how I'm going to go on with this marker, this fine liner now. I'm really disappointed with that. It's kind of upset me a bit, I'm not going to lie. That's been a good 25 minutes that's had to dry out. So, yeah. I'm actually trying to keep away from the edge of the yellow so it doesn't bleed, because the eye can't really pick up that difference there, but... This is where I want it to bleed, and it's not going to bleed now. So I'm trying to add in a bit of shadow here, and I'm just getting frustrated. Like, I really am. I'm just getting frustrated. The bleeding seems to be worst at saturation points where I've put more than one layer of marker down. That's where it's really like causing issues. So maybe it is just the fact that the paper's saturated and it just can't, oh my goodness, I just can't deal with it anymore. Now, if I had a really good fine liner, I could start outlining all the different parts of the design to make it look as if it's popping out from the paper. I am not going to be able to achieve this with this. Number one, because the line width is too thick, but secondly, because of the bleeding situation, which you can see, especially here, is just getting worse and worse. So... yeah, I'm just going to stop there. I can honestly say this is the most not fun I've had doing one of these challenges. I keep wanting to go back and like blend in more marker, but all I'm going to do is just make everything bleed like crazy. So I don't see the point. I feel as if I'm kind of wasting my time, if I'm honest. We don't have the opacity to put in a background and go over the top unless we use a pale background, which limits us to this sort of day glow green colour, or the yellow, which obviously we've used around the outside. So yeah. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts. I know I'll probably get a bit of bashing for being a moany so-and-so about this particular set of supplies, but as I always say, like, I'm a person that's prepared to take a gamble, and I know that everything that I get in a box I'm not going to love, and I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, this is amazing. It doesn't mean that they're not good products. and I actually think that these pens are quite nice. It's just not something that I would use. If you do any sort of calligraphy, or even if you do Christmas cards, that kind of thing, these pens are going to be of great benefit to you because the nibs are amazing on them, and the fact that you can blend them out a little bit. I would wager as well that this is probably, a fair amount of this is to do with the paper as well. So I think if you're going to work, you know, if you're going to work the surface as hard as I have here, you would maybe be better using a different type of paper, you know, if you're wanting to try and blend these out. But that's it's taking the fine liner with it as well. So yeah, just stop, Jem, just stop. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, guys. This has been a really interesting box. Please look after each other, stay safe, and we'll see you back in the cave on Thursday for another video. So have a good day, everyone, and bye for now.